right now. This is Lee Umphrey, President of Eastern Maine Development Corporation, and I'm here with a friend of EMDC and my longtime friend, Vanessa Santarelli. Vanessa is the owner and the champion of all through her Your Maine Concierge business. I know Vanessa previously in her role at Department of Labor. She was the legislative liaison working closely with Governor Baldacci's office, and she was a real advocate for workers and equality and making sure that the system worked. And I also know Vanessa through the Maine Primary Care Association, where she turned around that organization to have it become a really vibrant network. I was down in Harrington Health Center, one of the smaller centers, and so I know Vanessa really well, and I value her work. And so, Vanessa, Your Maine Concierge, why did you start it, and what are you doing?
Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this podcast. I know the great work that you do in your role at EMDC, and I know that you support a lot of the businesses that I end up working with through my business, Your Maine Concierge. So yeah, I mean, as you know, I had a 20-year career in public policy and advocacy. And I always say to people that every dime that I earned in my real job, I spent at Maine's restaurants and inns and trying to experience the beauty of our state all over the place. But actually working at the Department of Labor and places like that afforded me the opportunity to travel around and get an even deeper appreciation for what our state had to offer, both in the rural areas, but also in some of the more urban areas. So after 20 years of doing that work, I wanted to use my creativity in a different way. And I also was putting together personalized itineraries, travel itineraries for dining, lodging, and activities for colleagues of mine around the country. Would say, oh, we're coming to Maine and we understand that you know sort of all these places. So I took a big risk. I left career that I had been in for a long time, cashed in my retirement, as I think a lot of people do when they're starting a small business, and took the risk and took a jump. And I mean, we're in vacation land, and unlike those big sort of corporate search engines that people I think sometimes use when they're planning their travels, that travel planning can be overwhelming for people. And I think a lot of people want someone who's a local, who knows the business owners and, can give them more of a personalized experience. So that was part of the reason why I got into starting this business.
And in personalizing the experience, what do you do with a client, say, from the Midwest that's coming to Maine for the first time and going to visit the coast and come all the way up to Bar Harbor and beyond?
Yeah, so depending on how long someone's planning a visit for, I typically schedule an initial consultation call. I also can do it where I send a client a consultation questionnaire, but more often than not, the client wants to talk with me and I want to talk with them because it helps to get a sense of what their interests are, what their overall travel goals are. And sometimes people say they know what they want, and then through that conversation, I'm able to learn a few other things that I think might, if they're exposed to them, they might really enjoy. So I ask questions about their preferences relating to lodging, dining, activities. Are they outdoorsy? Are they foodies? Do they enjoy art and cultural experiences, museums and historical societies and things of that nature? Are they looking for a more sort of traditional Maine experience like camping or going to a sporting camp, or are they looking for something a little bit more luxurious? And I think that's the beauty of what we've got here in Maine, is we can offer so many, a really diverse range of experiences for people. I also think I encounter a lot of folks that, they want to come to the coast and they want to spend a lot of time on the coast. And the coast is obviously stunning, as you well know. But I also try to encourage folks that are coming to visit to experience not just the coast, but especially if they're here for a week or more, go inland, see the lakes region, see the mountains, go up north to Aroostook County or down into some of the other rural areas, because there is so much more to our state than just the coastline.
It really is. And I neglected in your introduction, which was very glowing, I neglected to say you're also
Overly generous.
you're also a star of the television program Maine Life. And
I'm the co-star of the television Maine Life. Aaron is the real star.
Aaron's not here right now, so you're the star. No, you both you play off each other beautifully. But what's great about it is you capture Maine, all of Maine. You know how particular I am of all of Maine. But what's enjoyable about that, not only in terms of promoting Maine and the businesses and the restaurants and the opportunities, but what do you like about being on that television program?
Well, I don't know where to begin. There's a lot that I like about being a part of it. I was actually really fortunate. I never expected to be on the show. Was very grateful that Aaron gave me the opportunity. We were actually introduced through my stepfather, George Campbell, who you know and have worked with, former town manager of Greenville, former DOT commissioner under 2 governors, former mayor of Portland. He's sort of done it all, but he introduced us. And Aaron had asked me, actually, she knew I was born and raised in Maine, and said, hey, you know lots of parts of the state. Would you like to put together an itinerary for one of our episodes? And I said, sure, let's see how that goes. And then I didn't realize she was going to invite me to actually participate on camera with her, which was a completely new experience for me, quite uncomfortable. But from that moment on, we became fast friends and realized that our dynamic on camera and off was something that we wanted to continue. So we've had a lot of fun with it, but more to the point, it's so rewarding. And I know this might sound cliche, but it really is rewarding to hear not just viewers say how much they enjoy the show and that they sit with their pen and pencil, the pad and paper, writing down all the places that we go, and they basically copy those itineraries and experience them themselves. But we hear from so many of the businesses we feature saying that, I mean, every day somebody's coming in and saying, hey, we're coming in because we saw you on Maine Life. Even people who are in like the next town over from a place saying, we never knew this restaurant was there. We never knew this, art gallery was there. And so it's been really not just fun, and we certainly have our share of fun, but very rewarding.
Well, it's really given an appreciation of how many good things there are every place. And we all know you're a connoisseur of high quality, good stuff. So
almost as much as you.
Well, almost, but so has there been any surprises going around Maine? Any hidden gems, anything that you never realized that's actually there?
Wow. That's a tough one. I mean, I think that I'm always surprised, no matter how many times I've gone to different regions of the state. Every time I go back, I think my appreciation grows for it. And, a place that seems familiar to someone, like, if they've gone to, let's just say Jackman, in the winter because they love snowmobiling, and it is like one of the best places in the state to go snowmobiling, to sort of go up there in the summer or fall. It's just a completely different experience, but also I think just as enjoyable for somebody who's a fan of the outdoors. So, I mean, there's certainly hidden gems everywhere. And I also think that one of the surprising things to most people now is that while Portland has been rightly named, the foodiest town in America by Bon Appetit magazine, and, the Mid-Coast and certain other areas in southern Maine have been recognized as really sort of destinations for, Maine's culinary scene. I mean, there are incredible farms and, dining experiences and other, inns that, a lot of young people are moving in and sort of creating these reimagined and re-envisioned and breathing new life into some of these communities. So I'm just really excited about what more is to come, and that I think, places like Fairfield with Meridian's Kitchen, and places that people, will say to us, and when we feature them on the show, it's like, oh my gosh, who would have thought? A place that has just this incredible farm to table dining atmosphere is in the town of Fairfield. And I love hearing that from folks.
Right. And the pandemic was hard on communities and businesses. And we work closely with a lot of restaurants and hotels and hospitality groups with PPP, but also distributing some of the federal funds through the state to help businesses stay afloat. How do you think restaurants and hotels and others managed through the pandemic?
Well, I think it's been a different experience for depending on who you ask. Sadly, some folks that I had worked with really closely, whether it was restaurant owners or farmers, innkeepers, others, really had no choice but to close during that period. And that was really devastating to a lot of towns, particularly in the rural areas, but just as devastating in larger communities. And I think that, I just remember this saying, a lot of folks that were coming to Maine during COVID because they were like, oh, Maine's got all these wide open spaces and fresh air, and we can come up there and still enjoy like a vacation or a getaway. We don't have to be in the city. We're making comments, and this certainly wasn't widespread, but I would hear comments like, oh, yeah, the pandemic was difficult. Well, we're still in the pandemic. The pandemic was tough, but look, these restaurants and inns and everyone else, these Maine guides, they're making money hand over fist this season. They're making tons of money. They're not hurting. And I think it was just a real lack of understanding, and I think really damaging because that misperception, I think, leads people to think things that aren't accurate. So by way of example, and speaking for my own business, I had to innovate and change some of my business services so that I could make it through, because I had to delay my mortgage, as did a number of the restaurant owners and others that I partner with. We accumulated tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt that's going to take us years and years and years to pay off. So, and I'm a sole proprietor. I can't even imagine what, some of my friends who employ, Maine workers who, took it upon themselves to say, look, we need to stay open, not just for our own well-being, but for the well-being of our, staff and their families. And so I think that there are people who are still struggling a lot, and especially now, given the staffing shortage crisis that we're going through, and rising costs for everything from gasoline and heating oil to the cost of food and those types of materials. So, and construction and, you name it.
Yeah. And so in terms of workforce and the industry trying to hire people, how are you working with different people, restaurants and hotels, and have you become a bridge to programs through the Department of Labor?
Well, so interestingly enough, well, a couple things. One is that I get contacted regularly by inns saying, we're looking for a new chef, we're looking for a general manager, restaurants saying we need cooks, line cooks in the kitchen, or servers or bartenders. Do you know of anyone? And on occasion, I've been really happy that I at least am talking to folks all the time. And so I know that if somebody leaves one position in one part of the state, they may very well be looking for a new opportunity. And so there have been instances where through my business, I have been able to make some of those connections, and that's been great. And then, interestingly, you mentioned the Maine Department of Labor, Commissioner Laura Fortman. I've actually been working with her to pull together a small listening session and conversation dialogue down here in the Mid-Coast region, in the Penn Bay region over here in Rockland. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be meeting with about 10 to 15 local chefs, restaurant owners, and innkeepers, smaller businesses who are finding it particularly challenging to not only keep their days and hours of operations sufficient in enough to pay their bills and to pay their employees, but in some cases, they've either had to close businesses, and I'm talking about places like Cafe Miranda, that has been, I mean, that's one of the sort of institutions, culinary institutions, legendary restaurant here in Rockland, and others who have privately messaged me and said, if we don't really start getting some workers, we're going to be forced to close. And to Commissioner Fortman's credit, she wants to have, you know, these direct conversations. She wants to see how the department can be helpful. I know that she's working very closely with Hospitality Maine, the trade association over there, to do apprenticeship programs and other programs to get these workers in. And I also am grateful that she's tried to get her rapid response team, which typically works on like mass layoffs and closures and devastating things like that, to go in and try to meet with these restaurant owners and put them in contact with folks who might be unemployed and who are looking for work. So I do give the commissioner a lot of credit for wanting to have these direct conversations and to try to do something meaningful.
Yeah, and you know, in some ways, having you as an advocate for the hospitality industry with your background, you're perfectly positioned to kind of help build that bridge.
I hope that's true.
It is true. I know it's true. Everything I say is true, Vanessa.
Oh.
A lot of the Maine restaurants are using, you know, local stuff, grains, food, and talk about the farm to table tradition that's really growing here in Maine.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we have a lot of folks, this movement started, you know, long before I was around, long before some of the chefs here in Maine were around, although some of the chefs in Maine, I'm thinking about Chef Sam Hayward from 4th Street, Chef Melissa Kelly here in Primo restaurant here in Rockland, you know, Carrie Altiero, David Turin down at David's restaurant. There are, I mean, there's too many to name. But we have been really fortunate to have some real pioneers here in the state who, and I was just actually at a meeting this morning where Charlie Zorich, who's a new chef to Maine, but owner of the Hitchborn with his husband, Kirk Linder, was talking about, we don't feel like that's just a motto. It's a way of life for us, this sort of farm to table or sea to fork movement. These are the values that these chefs, farmers, cheesemakers, oyster farmers, you know, you name it, sort of live their lives by, because they believe that the highest quality comes from local. You know, Chef Melissa Kelly has the 0 km philosophy, where the food that she grows on the farm doesn't have to travel more than, you know, any kilometers in order to get from her farm to the kitchen. So yeah, that movement is alive, well, thriving, and I just see it just growing exponentially here as we, you know, become more and more of a culinary destination seen around the world.
Right, right. And talk a little bit about the camaraderie you're creating among chefs and owners. You have quarterly dinners, or how often do you get people together?
Thank you so much for mentioning that. Yeah, so I started over 2 years ago. I think it's almost 3 years ago now. We started this series of private chef and hospitality dinners where I co-host these sort of gatherings of the talented folks in Maine's food and hospitality universe. And it doesn't matter if you're a server, bartender, chef, restaurant owner, farmer, if you're some distillers, brewers, you name it, innkeepers, anyone who's connected to Maine's food and hospitality universe is invited and welcome and encouraged to come to these special events where literally the purpose is to gather around tables in a casual setting, to break bread, build new relationships, and to just have really a relaxing evening. I mean, the interesting thing is there are so many chefs and others, and I know I keep referencing chefs, but that want to go and experience their fellow chef and restaurant owners' restaurants, but they end up being open on the same nights and then closed on the same night. So oftentimes they don't get an opportunity. These events that we hold every month, and in some cases a couple of months, except for in July and August for obvious reasons, give these folks an opportunity to go and support one another and get a chance to taste the food and to meet some of the folks from around Maine that they've been wanting to, that they might follow on social media or have been following for some time just through regular media and by way of reputation. And some of the partnerships that have come out of these experiences have been awesome, like inns who met farmers, sourcing microgreens and other greens for their breakfast dishes that they serve to guests in the morning, or gelato makers getting to partner with folks who who grow certain products, and those products then get turned into ice cream. So it's been fun. They are very fun. But also, again, sort of rewarding and I think important experience now here in our state.
Yeah. At EMDC, we value communities, businesses, and workers, and we try to recognize them. And one of the things you're doing for the industry is fantastic, because you're rewarding success and recognizing people's effort. And it's really quite remarkable that somebody who has a great interest and love for good food and drink is now applying that with all the other skills you have. So you're really making quite a remarkable impact, not just in the work you do every day, but on your television show with Erin.
Erin's television show with me as a producer, and this is going to get turned around somehow. I'm going to get a phone call or a text message.
Well, she can do this some other time, but no, we do really wanted to have you because of the work we do with businesses and workers, and because of your background and what you're doing now, have you part of our effort to, make Maine a better place, and you're really making a great impact.
Well, thank you. I feel the same about your organization, particularly in the northern and down east and rural parts of the state, that sometimes I know folks wonder if they're sort of being considered as much as some of the southern parts and coastal areas. So I think it's great to know what you all are doing, and I'm honored to have been a participant in this podcast series. So thank you.
Well, you've really made a statewide effort. If you weren't, you'd be hearing from me, right? Like you have in the past. But
yes, I'm very aware of that.
Okay. Well, Vanessa, so nice to see you, and really appreciate everything about you, and I'll see you soon.
Yes, you will. All right. Thanks so much, Lee.